So welcome to the end of the world, and Happy New Year. So everybody just done with 2016? Yeah. Just done with it? Are we done with the divisive politics, the violence, the chaos of 2016? Are we done? Are we ready for 2017? Are we ready to heal the planet and the human race? Yeah. Yes. Says it's not now, then when? Really, when? Okay, some of us may need time, a bit of time to recover from 2016 and from our New Year's Eve events. Take your time. Got a couple days. Now, I've never really been one to celebrate the purchase of a new calendar and the frustration of having to remember to write a new date on checks. Never been my thing. I prefer to stay home on New Year's Eve. But then my frustrations are now gone because of, electronics. I don't have to go out and buy a new calendar anymore. It's already right there. I don't have to worry about checks because everything's a debit card. I've never really celebrated New Year's Eve because I always thought it was just so arbitrary, just another day. It's another sunrise, like our reading said. And I verified it this morning. I was out there. The sun did rise, right on time, just as predicted. But as it turns out, though, the tradition of New Year's Eve celebrations are much older than I ever realized, and it has nothing to do with the calendar per se. And as you would guess, it's also much deeper meaning. So last night, according to many pagan and heathen traditions of Europe, last night was 12th night, the end of the 12 days of Yuletide. Yes, even the 12 days of Christmas have origin in pre-Christian pagan times. Should we be surprised? Now, the Christian version of the 12 days of Christmas start on Christmas Day and ends on January 5th or 6th, called Epiphany, which marks the sign of to the Gentiles that Christ was born. It's the day, according to the story, that the Magi appeared in Bethlehem. Tradition holds that the 12 days of Christmas is a sort of in-between time marked by many holy days and holidays in the church. The end of which, according to an article on Christmas Today by Edward and Jennifer Woodruff Tate, they say that Epiphany sends us into the world to live out the incarnation, to witness to the light of Christ in the darkness. Well, similarly, in the original pagan version of the 12 days of Yuletide, it's an in-between time, though the dates are a little different. And the 12 days of Yuletide begin on December 20th, and the 12th night is actually New Year's Eve. That was 12th night. The old pagans, like many, like the Jewish calendar, begins at sunset. According to an article in goheathen.org, yes, goheathen.org, and what I read there coincides with my research on the subject years ago. It says that Mother Night is the first of the 12 nights of Yule. It starts on December 20, and the 12th night is the 31st. In Yule proper, when our ancestors used a lunar calendar, it left about 12 days left over each year between the solstice and January 1st. So the 12 nights of Yule were considered to be not part of the old, not yet part of the new either. A time in between, time of gestation. And because these days were considered to be outside the year, they were considered especially holy. A time when the veil between the worlds was thin. Time when the gods were more likely to walk the earth in physical form, they say. Now, our cultural memory lives on in this tradition, in our tradition of New Year's Eve, the 12th night. And it's such a shame that we've lost the depth and the mystery of our holidays. and kept only the celebratory and maybe the overdoing it a bit, when that was the culmination of 12 days of reflection, it had much more meaning. And now it's just another way to consume. We've lost the depth to so many of our holidays. And the mystery. We've lost the mystery. It seems that in our effort to expose the superstitions of the past, to expose them to the light of scientific truth, we inadvertently cut the invisible ties that bind us to the rhyme and rhythm of the natural world. There was a reason for much of what our ancestors did, even if we cannot see it. Much of what we call superstition today served real biopsychosocial purposes in their day. Yes, they weren't factually true, but they helped give meaning and purpose in the lives of the people. Or imagine our descendants will think us quaint and unsophisticated for locking ourselves away in climate-controlled, artificially lit, sterilized buildings, eating artificial and sterilized food out of artificial and sterilized containers. Such nonsense, they will say. Such superstitious nonsense, they believe themselves outside the natural order of things. And look what they almost did to our planet. The idea of spending 12 days in this in-between time, neither of the old or new year, not of this world or the next. It draws to mind, to my mind anyway, this is how my mind works, it draws to mind the pupation period that separates the life of a caterpillar and the life of a butterfly. It is said that during the pupal stage, the caterpillar almost completely dissolves, and from these raw ingredients, the butterfly is created. While this is not quite true, a few organs survive and clumps of stem cells stay intact, it's accurate enough. Because as National Geographic put it, within the chrysalis, an inching cylindrical eating machine remakes itself into a beautiful flying creature that drinks through a straw. Think about that. An inching cylindrical eating machine remakes itself into a beautiful flying creature that drinks through a straw. It's the end of the world, says the caterpillar, and it's just the beginning, says the butterfly. The 12 days of Yuletide, the 12 days of Christmas, can be understood as a time for us to let go of what was and prepare for what is to come. It's a time for letting the past dissolve away, as we modeled in our ritual earlier, so that we are ready for what lies ahead of us. This year, this idea seems all the more relevant as it seems so far the year ahead may be like nothing we have experienced in a very long time. Many of us are worried that we're not ready for what this next year is asking of us. Are we prepared for what life is asking of us this year? Are we ready? Can we even prepare for what is coming? Or what many think is coming? For we don't know. Because from what I see and hear, many of us are so caught up in fear and anger, that we can't see through the fog and imagine anything but the end of the world. We can't see that through the relative chaos of this in-between time between election and coronation, inauguration. It seems that we can't imagine anything good at the end of it all. Now, don't get me wrong. Just like the pupating butterfly, this is a vulnerable time, and all due caution must be taken. But the future is not yet written. Now, the ancient Greeks, they believed in fate. To them, fate was stronger than the gods. Freud missed the point of the Oedipus story. It had nothing to do with incest. It was about fate. Oedipus was fated to kill his father and marry his mother. It was predicted at his birth, and so it had to happen. But his parents, in an attempt to deny his fate, his parents sent him away to be raised by others. Well, that settles that. So the father that he killed and the mother that he married were complete strangers to him because he tried to deny fate. Fate was everything. And unfortunately, much of this philosophy was incorporated into Christian theology in the effort to strengthen and legitimize the new religion. See, we're just like the Greek philosophers, was what the apologists said. We believe the same things they do. So these ideas carried forward and are part of our culture. Because whether we are Christian, identify as Christian or not, these ideas are so embedded in our culture that it is really difficult to deny them. They're part of our DNA. Even if we're not thoughtfully consider them as our belief system, it's so inbred in our culture that this idea that there is a fate, that we are fated, that things must be a certain way. The Christians, the idea of predestination, that everything under the sun was determined at the time of creation and nothing we can do or say can change that fact. It reached its zenith in the theology of John Calvin. So, just consider the implication of the idea that the creator of the universe determined the fate of every human, every animal, every worm, every virus, every mote of dust, all at the creation of the universe. Imagine the implication that not only the fate of our life is determined, but also our afterlife. Imagine that you weren't deemed one of the select few that would make it to heaven. Now ask if such a God, an all-knowing, all-powerful God, can such a God be an all-loving and all-caring God? Such theology implies that the death and destruction in Aleppo is part of God's plan, right? That same God created AIDS, cancer, diabetes. And diabetes, according to this idea, has nothing to do with the big gulps of Coke and the Dunkin' Donuts, because it was God's plan. You see the danger there. So just give me my meds and I'm good to go as I drink my Coke and eat my donuts. The thing is that many of these theologians, including John Calvin, never argued for a loving God. Their God was judging and biased. In my opinion, they created God in their own image. Now, it is the roots of our faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith. We're grounded in a complete rejection of fate and determinism. William Ellery Channing, prominent minister of early 19th century Unitarianism, said it this way. He said, ask the majority of Christians what they consider the greatest evil from which Christ freed humanity, and they will say from hell, from eternal fire, from punishment in the next world. And as a corollary to this, they think that salvation is something that someone else can achieve for us. To gain salvation, said Channing, means to raise your fallen spirit, your own fallen spirit, cure your own sick soul, give it back its freedom of thought and conscience of love. Salvation is something we must do for ourselves. If addiction, disease, and despair can be cured by the prayers and actions of another, then they wouldn't exist. Because whose mother didn't pray for that? Salvation is and always has been an inside job. We are each responsible for the state of our own souls, the state of our own minds. We are each and every one of us called to answer the call of conscience and to love the hell out of this world, borrowing from our universalist forebears. Now, this doesn't mean, as some think it does, that we are all to blame for all the world's problems. We didn't start this fire, as Billy Joel put it. But we are surely trying to fight it. But just as we can't change the past, we can't change the circumstances we were born into. Just as we can't change that, we cannot change the future either. Because we can't change something that doesn't exist. Only the present is real. Only this moment is real. And each moment provides the foundation for the next. Thus, we establish through our thoughts and actions in this moment, and every subsequent moment, the conditions from which the future will arise. It is important then to understand the past, to understand the history, the context of the present, so that we are not prisoners of it. But the past is this prelude. The past can be dissolved away. It only sets the stage. It doesn't determine the next chapter in our story. Many people are acting as though 2016 was some extraordinarily horrible year, as though everything was just fine and dandy before 2016 came along. If we could somehow just erase 2016 from the history books, everything would be just great, right? But let's face facts. Everything that happened was just more of the same. What was going on in Syria was going on in 2015. There was just as much racism in 2015 as there is now. Isn't that when Black Lives Matter started? The foundation for the pipeline and the approvals for the pipeline at Standing Rock, that happened before 2016. Same with the Sable Trail pipeline here in Florida. All the approvals, all the money, everything that was raised, all happened before. 2016 was just a culmination of many different events. Same with, when I think of the institutional racism in this country, we've known for a long time. Let's see, where'd he go? There he is. I remember Ehrlichman there, John Ehrlichman, aide to Nixon. Remember what he said? He says, look, we understood we couldn't make it illegal to be young or poor or black in the United States, but we could criminalize the common pleasure. We understood that drugs were not the health problem we were making them out to be, but it was such a perfect issue for the Nixon White House that we couldn't resist. Thus began our war on drugs, on a lie. And we've known this for a very long time. But yet, it continues. This is the foundation for the institutionalized racism, why African Americans are imprisoned at such a high rate, why Native Americans are imprisoned at such a high rate. "2016 was nothing new. As for the election, it was just an extension of what's been happening for some time. The inevitable consequence of equating money with speech, the inevitable consequence of a me-first society that holds greed as a virtue, the inevitable consequence of racist drug policies that divide and conquer. But there was something different about 2016, something unexpected. One very important thing happened in 2016. And it's why 2017 can truly be the beginning of something new. In 2016, people woke up to the reality. They woke up and stopped believing that somebody else was going to save us. We woke up to the reality that salvation is in our own hands. No politician, no political party is going to do it for us. 2016 brought us to the end of our lives as caterpillars, as consumers. Because let's be honest, that is what the caterpillar does. Nothing else. It consumes and it grows. And that's been our economy, right? Consuming and growing, growing. And that world is over. It has to be over. We must let it die. Because there is a new and more wonderful world waiting for us. A world where we are not just mere consumers, but we are pollinators. A world in which our mission isn't just personal survival, but the survival of our species and the environment which supports it. Isn't that what a butterfly does? I mean, sure, it consumes what it needs, but it pollinates, it lays the eggs for the future. Now, St. Paul, he said this, "When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things." This is a time of transformation. Not everybody's ready for it, but we don't need everybody ready for it. The time of growing up and maturing of our species. We are growing up, we are waking up, and as difficult as it may feel in the moment, it is a good thing. Let us not pretend what lies ahead of us will be easy, that we are guaranteed victory. Let us not pretend that it is also impossible to change current trends. Every tide turns. Every storm ends. Every dusk leads to a dawn, every winter to spring. Now, personally, I'm in this for the long haul. I'm done playing small. I'm done pretending that I can be anything less than an incarnation than the eternal spirit of love. Donna Markova wrote a beautiful poem called "I Will Not Die, an Unlived Life." I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. This year will be a challenge. A challenge for our nation, a challenge for our fellowship, a challenge for each and every one of us. Our values and principles will be brought to the test. But I like how Albert Camus said it. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become absolutely free, that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And if you've seen Star Wars story Rogue One, rebellions are built on hope. Now, people often ask me why I am so hopeful, why I have hope for the future. And I'm pretty sure that some consider me naive. Some may even consider me foolish for holding on to hope against all odds. Well, I'm kind of like Han Solo in that respect. Don't ever tell me the odds. Because today, and again, I verified this fact, today the sun rose. And it rose just as it did every day. It was bright, it was glorious, there was a crowd out there to see it. Some days, though, it's obscured by clouds. But always it's there. Today that beach was full of people to witness the extraordinary beauty of this most ordinary event. But on those cloudy days, most of those same people stay home, thinking there's nothing to see. Hope is like the sun. It's always there, whether we see it or not. It is easy to see and hold on to when the conditions are just right. And then let go when things don't go our way. Hope doesn't go away because it's obscured any more than the sun can go away. I choose to hold on to hope when all seems dark, because though I can see the best of this world through hope, I can see the best of this world. I know the other stuff is there, but the lens of hope lets me see the best. I can see the best in the world, I can see the best in humanity, and I can connect with the best in myself. It's not a denial of what's there, of the imperfections. It's the choosing to look beyond them, to find the hope and find the good in all people. Hope to me is the spark of the eternal that brought forth life out of this rock that is hurling through space. Hope is the inner light that's in all of us. It's in all beings. So for 2017, I say, let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine for the whole world to see. As an individual, let it shine. As a congregation, as a fellowship, let's let our light shine. Because there are people out there who are looking for this beacon of hope that we call Unitarian Universalism. And let it shine as a nation. A nation that I feel has lost its way but can be brought back. A nation where integrity means something. Integrity, to me, is the goal of spiritual development, of the spiritual life. To be whole. To be one in thought and action. There's no mystery to it. It just feels better to live that way. And when we are in integrity, when we are living with integrity, the whole world is something fresh and new, because we see it as part of ourselves, not as other, as part of the whole. Because that's what integrity is. Wholeness. So as we move forward in this new year, remember, the people on the other side of the political aisle, the people on the other side of the spiritual aisle, anybody who's not you, they're part of you, part of the whole. And part of living in integrity is treating them as such. We don't cut off a finger because it's got a little cut on it. It is part of us, and it can be healed and brought back into the whole. Let's not continue the division that's been started. Let's begin the healing. And the decision to do so begins now. To decide to live according to our stated values and principles. That's what integrity invites us to do. It's not easy. It's the hardest thing we ever do, and it's a lifetime battle. It doesn't matter where we are in our lifetime. We can all move towards it. And it begins right now. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.